Good evening, afternoon, night, morning, whatever you find a way to watch or listen to this podcast. It is me, Omar from Hardware, and we're almost done with the off season. It is July. We're slowly churning out content on the channel. But again, after a day of work, I know you couldn't tell, but I'm back with a friend or enemy. Just kidding, a friend of the podcast, Sam Blevins of the Blue and Gold Report. And honestly, like he's all jokes aside, I get along with many Navy fans. Honestly, I enjoy the discourse, because it's kind of like I guess like two sides of the coin, not just Army Navy, but also conference versus not a conference as a service academy. So don't have any Air Force connections, unfortunately, but hopefully that'll change. But Sam, how's everything going?
Everything's good. Just ready to rock and roll, talk about some Navy football, and express some opinions that hopefully most people understand, but you never know.
Yeah, 100%. And so we got a fun show for you today. Navy focused, and I joked around that my family was being held hostage. They are not. I'm willingly talking about Navy because it's an interesting time with realignment happening, which we talked about earlier on the podcast. Which I might add a banner to, just depending, if I'm not lazy, if I'm not too lazy to add a banner to that one. Just kidding. But so the first bit of Navy news that came out was ESPN. Well, first, I guess just to preface, ESPN and Navy have one of the more unique television contracts in college football, as Navy stayed with CBS Sports Network when they jumped conferences, with all their home games being on CBS Sports Network, and the years that they hosted the Notre Dame game being on CBS, well, CBS proper, the network. So with that, ESPN was able to broadcast one Navy game per year, one Navy American Conference game per year as part of the deal. And then there's also been some oddities like the dreaded 2020 BYU Navy game. That game was a Navy home game, and that game was on ESPN, as we all know, because it substituted as the Notre Dame game that was supposed to be on ESPN with Game Day supposed to be there. Which I would hope Game Day is going to Ireland this year. I don't know if they are, but that's another discussion. So this year, ESPN chose to broadcast East Carolina on November 18th on an ESPN network at noon Eastern time. Sam, what are your thoughts on ESPN selection? Honestly, I look at the schedule and I'm not a fan of like many of Navy's conference home games, to be honest with you.
Let me tell you, I love it honestly because I think it'll give a lot of people around the country a good game to watch. Almost every year ECU and Navy are close. You look at last year, multiple overtimes. I was there. It was wild. It was crazy. And the teams just seem to be a good matchup against each other. You have a more pass heavy offense with ECU against more of a run offense and Navy. You get to see really a contrast in styles, and you know showing that on national TV. I think it's a good decision that they chose that game.
Yeah, it has been close, honestly, and ECU is one of the few programs in the American that Navy had. I can't even say extensive a history with before joining the conference, with like meeting a couple times from like 2006 to like the early 2010s. So I agree with that. Like those games, no matter where those teams stand, are always close. I know Navy beat East Carolina last year at Dowdy, and then the year before that, I know it was a last minute finish. I know it was just a back and forth game. Honestly, like a kick return
54
touchdown.
yarder. I like to talk about it, Omar.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, no, I legitimately did not know how it ended because I was just keeping tabs on it. But but yeah, that being said, like you look at the other conference games, like USF. USF is in a perennial rebuild at the moment. On September 30th, you have North Texas, which could have some potential, but North Texas just fired Seth Luttrell. And I don't think Austin Ani's coming back for North Texas, so that one could be hit or miss. With North Texas being a Conference USA move up. And then after that, you have UAB, which I like UAB a lot. I know I say North Texas is a Conference USA move up, but UAB with Trent Dilfer coaching. Honestly, like that's going to be an exciting. I'm not going to say circus. That's just going to be an exciting storyline. I'm not going to disrespect the program. That one could have been interesting too. And like UAB, honestly, has been a Conference USA mainstay. Some might even say power the past few years. Honestly, they've had more success in East Carolina. But again, first meeting there. And I mean, Navy's only met North Texas the once in the past, and then of course USF is definitely a non-option with how bad they've been. So I mean, honestly, I kind of would have. I'm gonna play the devil's advocate. I kind of would have liked to see a Navy UAB. ESPN stuck Navy UAB, honestly, with everything that entails, because I feel like you're going to get a nice defensive struggle, which may be the reason why they picked ECU instead, because UAB, they love to run the football like no matter what. East Carolina, they like to air it out, but East Carolina, they're losing. I mean, they're definitely losing Holton Ahlers. They lost Keaton Mitchell, so like two of the
Yeah.
biggest pieces of that offense. So, I mean, I dig it, but I guess the one closest one that ESPN could have picked is a UAB, honestly.
I mean, I think that would have been interesting. I think, Trent Dilfer coming in is going to be very interesting. Some people are calling it, prime light, Dion goes to Colorado, Pac-12, big powerhouse team, and Trent Dilfer's kind of doing the same thing at UAB. I think he might have some success though, especially if they just give him the keys and let him drive. I think it will definitely be interesting to see within the first couple of years what he does with that program and if it does in fact thrive.
Yeah, I mean exactly too, and I mean I'm not sure if also the thing too, like ESPN of course is, I mean their business. They focus on the money. So something that's interesting to me is like the market outlook, where it's like out of all those, I don't really think you'd consider East Carolina to be in the Charlotte market. I know we just talked beforehand, gave me a quick schooling of North Carolina geography, where it's like Charlotte's on the western side of the conference and East Carolina's on the eastern side. I don't know if East Carolina's like close to Raleigh, Raleigh or Durham, if you consider it that market. I'm not so sure, honestly.
So Greenville's about an hour and a half from Raleigh east and a little bit north. So I mean, you could say it hits that Raleigh market, but you already got NC State and those schools kind of saturating that area.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's the whole thing with saturation. So maybe it's all the same with UAB, I mean USF, North Texas and all that, like playing in crowded markets, which like East Carolina's in a smaller market that's crowded with like the presence of the North Carolina school. So that just adds another aspect to it. Same thing with UAB. I mean, like good program, but competing against Alabama, Auburn, and Troy. Like Troy, and I mean, well, not even South Alabama. Like that's more South Alabama's more so like a Mississippi type school. I mean, I honestly like I've never been to the Gulf Coast, but it just feels like a different state than the rest of Alabama. Like you tell me beaches, I don't think of Alabama. Like I'm sorry, but I guess that being said,
Nope.
I mean, oh no, go ahead. Oh no, my
Oh
bad. But
no, no, I was just no. When I think of beaches, I think Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, but also I'm kind of a North Carolina homer, so maybe I'm not the best with beaches, but I will say North Carolina beaches are pretty great.
I mean, you know better than me, honestly. Like, I mean, when I was in Georgia, I never really went to any beaches. I mean, I went to Conway for the Myrtle Beach Bowl and, Coastal Carolina game, but like I didn't actually get on the beach. But yeah, like that being said, I mean, ESPN's like selections of Navy home games have been some bangers, like the 2021 Cincinnati Navy game. Like that one, honestly, like just the thought of Cincinnati struggling with a Navy team that honestly, like their offense didn't even perform in like the top percentile like performances like for them that year. Like it was just like death by a thousand paper cuts that game. But and then of course like let's see, like yeah, 2020, the Navy Tulsa game, with Tulsa coming in ranked and Navy giving them a hard time. So they've picked some good games. So I trust that this one will be the same as well. So moving on to our next topic. This is something like I wanted to discuss, like, and it's always like it's a point of discussion because like I asked you like how you felt about the schedule. Because it must be, I feel like Navy fans have the most anticlimactic, I guess, like off-season schedule like reveal slash like process, because like I mean we all know that they're in the American, that's 8 conference games. Unlike Air Force, they're tied to 3 non-conference games, Army, Navy, and of course Notre Dame, which I guess I don't know if you haven't figured out we're talking about later on. And then there's just that one game, like there's that like, and it's interesting how they fill that one game, because most years I like Navy plays an FCS school out of the Patriot League, which I mean I'm a Patriot League defender. Growing up 10 minutes from Holy Cross, I love the history and tradition of these schools. Other years of playing FBS school like Marshall, I mean Hawaii in 2018 as well. So it's just an interesting dynamic. This year's program, I mean, or FCS game or one free bingo spot in non-conference, kind of underwhelming in Wagner. I mean, and I'm not saying that in terms of like the program's like ability, even though like they got absolutely like embarrassing in Syracuse last year. Like they had to shorten the second half because of that. Hopefully Navy can do the same thing. Would be cool. But like again, like I just harp on the tradition. Like the Patriot League, I feel like the Patriot League, no one gets excited for these games. I'm sorry. Like I have to put out in front. Like I have to apologize. Like no one really. I feel like no one gets excited because I've lived through it. Like we like the greatest Colgate team in over 50 years. Well, sorry, I can't say they went to a national title game. One of the greatest Colgate teams in over 50 years came to West Point in 2018, and I'm here thinking, I'm like, man, I would rather be at Yankee Stadium watching Notre Dame Syracuse, but I have to be here. So even with that Colgate team had only allowed 36 points or so
Yep.
to like FCS opponents, and like even then I wasn't excited. And then like the week before that they had Lafayette come, and no one really cared, honestly. That being said, I feel like people care even less because Wagner is has little tradition. They're not in the Patriot League. They're not familiar faces. So I just want to know your thoughts on that.
I mean, it is an underwhelming choice. I'm not gonna lie. With the Patriot League, at least you have the ties of every other sport that Navy is a part of. They're in the Patriot League. This I don't know. I guess it was just someone to fill in the schedule. Hopefully an easy win. Maybe practice a few things. But I would like to see some more competition. Maybe another FBS team. That would be nice. Being able to give the guys on the team a chance to compete with maybe a higher conference team. Like a SEC because Army gets to play LSU. I mean, that's great. That is awesome. I mean, okay, but like let's think about this. It was pretty cool when they played in the big house and they almost won. Like if and then Navy get when they were independent still, which I sometimes wish we were still independent. Navy played Ohio State and played them well, and Keenan Reynolds got to kind of show off for the country who he was. So the Wagner choice. I know we're probably paying him, but it's just kind of meh. It's just a game on the schedule that we should win.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll say this. I mean, I'll clear things up. I am still a huge Patriot League fan. In fact, like I'm excited for Holy Cross Army. Like I know that's like this year on Veterans Day weekend. I know that that's not a pushover game. That honestly will be a closely contested game, to be honest with you. But I guess in terms of I guess excitement compared to like the other programs, like we I guess like that come to Mikey Stadium, came to Mikey Stadium during that time, whether it be, and it's not just the Power Fives, it's not just like the Duke, like the one time that Duke came to Mikey Stadium, it's like the MAC schools that would come. Hawaii came, during some, and also Tulane also as well. So like that variety is nice. So I just want to clear that up. All love with the Patriot League, but at that time, just the poor attitude made me not excited for those games. But I mean, that being said, it's like for you, and I feel like it's definitely a trade off. I really feel like it's a trade off. Like I guess with being an independent and like you guys being in the conference, because you guys have access to the playoff, which I guess at this point, 12 team like the 12 team expansion is about, honestly, we'll say like 7 years too late because the 2016, 2015, and 2016 teams were so close to the New Year's Six. And like if you like backtrack that, that's a spot in the 12 team playoff. Like they came
Yeah.
so close. And it's like now though with the additions that the Sun Belt, or sorry, that the American had, Sun Belt Twitter's just loud lately, that the American honestly is on the same level as the Mountain West when Boise State's doing good in terms of I guess being in the driver's seat for the American for the New Year's Six and now 12 team playoff. They're in the same level, I think, now, if not a bit lower, because Boise State, they had the great end of their season. Fresno State's consistent. You have Air Force too. Air Force has been breathing down the heels of all those programs as well. And you look at the American, you have SMU who can't really finish a season. You have
No.
Memphis, who I feel like I really do feel like Memphis's best years are behind them, to be honest with you. Like, I mean, I haven't really been too impressed with them since the 2019 Cotton Bowl. And then that's really it in terms of New Year's Six contenders on a consistent basis. So I guess long story short, like you guys have access to the playoff, but it's like for me, it's for me thinking about like if Army goes 12-0 through some miracle, even 11-1, that they might be able to be in the 12-team playoff. Like that was like going back to the dreaded 2019 season. Um, there was talk about if Army beats Michigan, can they make the New Year's Six? And I'm just thinking like if we're in a conference and we schedule Michigan, like that wouldn't even be a question. Like we can go 11-1 and only lose to Michigan and still go to the
Yep.
New Year's Six. But like the fact that like we could have gone 12-0, beat Michigan, and then end up going to the Frisco Bowl or like the Armed Forces Bowl. That kind of just shows like independence like through my eyes. Like scheduling's cool and everything, but we still play two FCS schools a year. We still have to win 7 games where we can just schedule a bad FBS team instead. So that's just my thoughts on like I guess where you stand.
I mean, we look back at Navy's last like really good season, which was Malcolm Perry 2019. I mean, there was some chatter, if we beat Memphis, like 12-1, maybe. But now you're right. I feel like the AAC is also now weaker with all the departures, which is going to make it even harder. And, just seeing how college football is going, I don't know how much of a chance we really have. Let's be honest. The expansion is going to help the SEC get 4 schools somehow into the playoff. Let them have even more money because they don't have enough already, apparently. And really, it's covered in the guise of, oh, we're gonna let the quote unquote little guy get in. And I feel like it's just a half-hearted effort to try to include an AAC or a Mountain West, when in reality they don't really care about those conferences. In my opinion, it's all about these Power Five conferences because they bring in the money. Well, I mean, there's so many good football teams outside the Power Five, but they don't get a look because they're not getting, the massive TV coverage. I mean, let's be honest. Remember PJ Fleck in Western Michigan? They were getting no TV coverage, but man, they were fun to watch. But it's just how it goes. The rich are getting richer, and soon enough, the poor are just going to get poorer.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I forgot to mention UTSA, of course. That definitely is. I feel like UTSA could take the spot of a Cincinnati or UCF in the American. That would definitely be a development to see. But I mean, yeah, like I think that's a good point too, because like you say this at the right time, because today I was seeing people talk about, oh, there shouldn't be auto bids to the playoff because you'll have 3 loss Pac-12 teams win the conference. Like I think that was the case in like 2018 when Washington won it, or like honestly, I think even in 2019, or sorry, not 2019, but 2021 when Utah made their first Rose Bowl. That was a Utah team that lost to San Diego State earlier in the season. And I mean, that was before like they, put Cam Rising at quarterback. But I mean, it still stands. Like that would be a team making it instead of a team in the Big Ten that's better in almost every sense. So that's just, I mean, that's an interesting point for sure. And I mean, of course, too, the Sun Belt too. Like I know Sun Belt Twitter is gonna hate me for not mentioning it. It just seems like they are, they are fighting everyone on Twitter. So I just want to mention that they're also a player, a force to be reckoned with in the group of 5. So I mean, the flexibility is cool and everything, but I just gotta wonder if like just knowing that you rotate through the same 13 opponents in conference, every few years, Notre Dame Navy Army, or sorry, Notre Dame Army Air Force, and then an FCS, and then maybe if you're lucky, maybe you'll get like another group of 5 school that wants to come down to Annapolis, so it's like
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. We know exactly who we're going to play, and I mean, just as I stated before, how college football is going, I'd rather have stability and be able to have those 1 or 2 games a season where everyone is just amped and juiced and ready to go. Because let's be honest, the postseason won't be as exciting anymore because of this playoff, and the bowl games don't mean as much anymore, and people are sitting out. So I'd rather be really juiced for 2 games, get really excited and pumped, and be like, we're facing the best of the best, instead of, having the same opponents, and, maybe one of them's really, really good and someone to get really excited for.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you too. So I choose to have a more optimistic view of college football because it's a sport I love. The sport we both love. I think for me too is like you bring up that point about like every year being like, oh, we're playing the same teams and everything. I think an added part of it too is like come bowl season as well. I mean, like looking at Brett McMurphy's projections earlier this year, or sorry, earlier this summer or spring, whatever. He had Navy going to the Military Bowl, which like a bowl game is. I love bowl games. You don't have to tell me like I don't have to. I don't have to tell anyone twice. That I think a bowl game is honestly amazing for programs, for most programs per se. But they had them going to the Military Bowl and staying at home in Annapolis. So it's like, yes, you get a Power Five to come to Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium, which like boosts attendance among the local population and old grads too. Like, I mean, I will admit the 2017 and 2015 games were so great because Virginia and Pitt are like old rivals for Navy. Like they were
Yep.
commonly on the schedule, and Army too for that matter. But it just has this thing where it's like, I mean, and if Navy goes 6-6 this year, like the Military Bowl is going to pick Navy because they haven't appeared in the bowl game in 6 years. So it's like, it's going to happen. It's kind of anticlimactic even in that aspect.
Great.
So it just feels like kind of a purgatory.
I mean, you're exactly right. We have Notre Dame like every year, which is cool, which I know I'll probably segue into the next conversation. But it is cool to have that game every year. But I mean, Army does have those, 1 or 2 games on the schedule that, I'm kind of jealous that you're playing LSU. That, I mean, I don't know if you guys are going to get killed. I wouldn't care. It's cool that, your team is playing, a team that's more known as the best of the best, and you get to see how you compete against them with that new offense that I don't know how it's going to be.
I don't know either. But for me, like, okay, like it's not that it's LSU. It's like Tiger Stadium isn't like one of my favorite college football venues. Like it's changed a lot over the years. Like, yeah, like the one big grandstand's still there. But what excites me more is over the years, like having Syracuse and Boston College on the schedule for like 4 year series. Like that is just like a trip back to the time machine in like the 1960s and 70s. Having like, playing Syracuse and Boston College again, especially having like Boston College go to Mikey Stadium. It's a great time. It's a great time. Granted, it's a in the middle of renovations Mikey Stadium, which like that's another thing you get me started on about the Mikey renovation project. Someone had to bring that up with their thesis. So I mean, like whatever person that is, I mean, thank you for altering a national gem, but that's neither here nor there. But like you said, a segue to our talk. I mean, of course, Notre Dame. I feel like I mean Notre Dame. Of course, everyone knows that it's week 0. It's in Ireland this year. It's great for the sport of college football to have those two schools play in Ireland. And honestly, I feel like it incentivizes the series to continue to be played because every year it's almost like a national tradition. Every single year when the Notre Dame Navy game comes around, you have Notre Dame fans. One of them calls it a Wookiee life debt. Not mincing any words. You have them complaining about the series, and it's just like complain about playing Navy when you can beat Marshall first. Okay, let me just mention that. Complain about that when you can beat Marshall when you stop struggling against Toledo. Like complain about the Navy series. Maybe if Navy stops running the triple option, maybe then they'll find value in that game. But uh, anyway, sorry, I'm getting too amped. But that was the I guess the last point of our discussion where I mean honestly, with everything happening in college football. I talked to a friend of mine, Cameron McPherson, and I asked him, I'm like, do you think that Notre Dame Navy is at risk with the changing, honestly, landscape of college football, of FBS college football? Because like everything's kind of remaining the same at lower levels, but just FBS college football is just changing almost in ways that we couldn't even like looking back in like 2019, like I would not have imagined USC and UCLA going to the Pac-12 or sorry, the Big Ten. So it's just changing in like ways that we can't even fathom. So I want to know your thoughts, Sam.
Well, I think it's in trouble, and it stinks. I thought it was in trouble in 2020 when, Notre Dame decided to, kind of say, no, we don't want to play this year under the guise of COVID. And then we play BYU. And I thought, crap, one of the longest standing traditions is now over. And we keep on playing it. Let's just talk about last year's game where we almost came back, and it was an exciting game. I didn't get to watch all of it because I was at an Ohio State game, which is a really cool stadium, by the way. Um, but
Hey, fan. I'm just kidding.
oh man, but yeah, it could be in trouble. You look at Notre Dame. I believe they still have a deal with the ACC where they have to play a certain amount of ACC teams, which good for them. ACC Power Five conference, whatever. But let's just we should keep it. We should really keep this going. You don't have that many traditions anymore in college football, and this is one of the great ones. Just the history behind it, the stories, the fact that Notre Dame beat us so many years in a row. And then in 2007, it's the Messiah, Paul Johnson, with his, innovative flexbone offense comes into Notre Dame Stadium and they somehow beat them. I mean, it's stories like that that keep this, rivalry alive and well. And I mean, Notre Dame fans, some of them whine and complain, but there's others that really love this tradition because they either have family or they know someone that was in the Navy, and this is something that they bond over. So I think it's in trouble, but I want to have faith in humanity that it just continues going because there is so much history to it. I mean, I would hope you feel the same way.
Yeah. So I agree. I am probably I mean, I get so far I hardly get fired up about anything in life, really. I mean, today my commander asked like why do I sound so glum? I'm just like, I'm just a very even person, like, in this environment at least. But it's like Notre Dame maybe just for that reason where it's like it just comes down to, oh, like we want to play bigger games. And it's like then play bigger games and stop scheduling MAC schools. Like no offense to the MAC, but it's like you can sacrifice like you can sacrifice playing
Try to be
Marshall. Yeah, exactly, exactly. Like you can sacrifice playing like Toledo or Marshall. Like no offense to those schools, great institutions, but it's like like that they're not traditional rivals to Notre Dame. Same thing. It's like the same thing with like the ACC agreement you said, which makes it so much more. I'm not gonna say powerful because like that would be me trying to like fake like being meaningful and everything, but that's why it makes it just so much more interesting that Notre Dame kicked. Can't even say Michigan because Notre Dame, Michigan have always feuded, but they kicked Michigan State off their schedule. They kicked Purdue off their schedule, which like almost is unthinkable. Like with those two schools being in Indiana, like Purdue, I think being one of the few schools to play Notre Dame before they were a national brand. Um,
yeah.
and like there's certainly more series that are like less frequently played. I know Pittsburgh was a fixture in the schedule every single year for a while. That one's not being played like every year at least. That one's like a part of the ACC rotation, but still. But Navy stayed on through all these years. And also too, it's like Notre Dame definitely is falling behind the times in college football at this time. I mean, it's just a proven fact. Like they want NBC money, they're not going to get it, which kind of like might force their hand to join the Big Ten, if we're being honest. But Notre Dame Navy is like it's a throwback to kind of like the Subway alumni age in Notre Dame, where it's like it just shows that Notre Dame, they still got their Subway alumni because I went to the this past year game. So could you imagine that I'm a bigger Navy fan than Sam? I'm just playing. But I went to this past Notre Dame Navy game in Baltimore. Check it off the list. It's a bucket list game. And then I went to the Babe Ruth house near M&T Bank Stadium. And there's a guy like I saw honestly not a dish, but I saw more more Notre Dame fans than Navy fans. Like as far as I remember, in terms of like I guess whether it's old grads or just like people from the area that like Navy, I encountered them at like more of them at least. One of the guys, oh I'm a Notre Dame fan. I'm like, oh, like what year did you graduate? He's like, oh, I'm just from Seattle. He's like, this is the first Notre Dame Navy I've attended. He's like, I'm from Seattle. I'm like, oh, did you attend? No, I just like Notre Dame. My brother went there. He's like, I always like Notre Dame. I'm like, that's cool, but that's kind of like that last semblance of like Notre Dame going to like New York City to play like Army. Notre Dame going to like big cities and like being a big ticket team, like the Chicago games, like back when Soldier Field was Soldier Field, which again, getting riled up, I should stop bringing stuff like this up. But that's just my play. I guess my long-winded speech to say that Notre Dame Navy like still has this place. Like no matter how many times Notre Dame beats Navy, like who cares? Like people like a lot of teams lose like games consecutively to like programs like Kansas and Texas. Like Kansas didn't like they hadn't beat Texas in over 70 years until they beat them in 2016. Like who cared? They're still in the same conference. Like, but anyway. So I guess we are closing. I guess we're just getting fired up with the last point of our podcast.
I mean, I think one last thing you got to talk about with Notre Dame is that they do have a bunch of rivalries as well that they put on the schedule. You still have the Notre Dame Stanford game. You still have the Notre Dame USC game. I mean, they have all that. So, it is cool that they have that NBC TV, whatever. They're independent still, but you are correct. They may have to join a conference at one point, and they may have to sacrifice one of those rivalry games. I hope it's not Navy, but seeing that USC is, Power Five team and Stanford's a Power Five team in the Pac 12. However, do you want two Pac 12 teams on your schedule? I don't know. But I'm just saying they're still competitive games. I mean, let's just think about it. 2016, that 28-27 thriller that Navy won, people still talk about that game. It was such an amazing game. And I mean, even last year, Navy didn't win, but my goodness, people use that as a reason to keep Ken Niumatalolo. And I mean, I wouldn't say that I would disagree with him at all, but I really do hope that it stays. And yeah.
I would have given Ken like this year too, but
Yes, I would have
yeah.
too.
So
Don't even
I thought you were
start.
criticizing. I thought you were saying like how could they use that as an excuse to keep him? It was
Oh,
like,
I
oh,
mean,
let's slow down there.
he really got almost everything out of those guys, and they were so young. I think this year should have been, the end all be all. If you do well, you stay. If not, but look, I don't get paid to do that, and I know a lot of people were unhappy. But look, it happened. It stinks, but he's at UCLA now. I hope he's having a great time enjoying that beautiful California sunshine. But I'm just ready for the boys to get back on the field and see what the wizard, Mr. Brian Newberry, can do.
Yeah, you and me both. I mean, UCLA loves their former Navy grads. I know Game Day did a feature on Bryce McDonald, either 2021 or 2022, being part of the UCLA staff. So I mean, it's cool. It definitely, I mean, it's definitely a fit, but yeah, like covered a lot in a short time in this podcast, and always a pleasure to have you on, Sam. I mean, I cover all college football, especially the Group of Five and FCS, but Service Academy football that's my roots, honestly. So I will always love talking about Service Academy, even if it's Navy, even if it's Air Force. So, but Sam, do
Always
you have
been,
anything? No, my bad. All
uh,
good.
you know, uh, thank you for having me on. It's always fun. Hope to be back on again soon. And go Navy, beat Army.
Yeah, I mean, you won't be on soon after. I'm just kidding, but yeah, no, I mean, I hope to have you soon again, and we continue to have these frequent conversations. Until next time, everyone, go Army, beat Navy, and peace, love, and soul.